Hey guys, tonight we unravel one of those quieter Olympian dramas that somehow never made it into the Hollywood adaptations. Picture this: the sun rising way too fast, the sky getting a little melty, and a very golden, very stressed god holding flaming reins, while screaming something about how this looked easier in the scrolls. You're watching the sun fishtail across the clouds like a divine bumper car, and honestly you probably won't survive this myth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all starts when Apollo decides, maybe out of boredom, maybe ego, that he wants to drive the Sun-chariot for a day. Normally, this gig belongs to Helios, the OG sun god, who has been commuting across the sky like clockwork since before Mount Olympus had plumbing. But somewhere along the myth timeline, Apollo gets rebranded with solar duties. Historians still argue whether that was a true religious shift or just good marketing. Either way, Apollo ends up with the keys. It's early morning. The sky is still stretching, the clouds yawning. Apollo climbs aboard the chariot, decked out in golden armor that's more for show than function. He flashes a god-tier smile at the horizon, tosses his curls, and whistles at the horses like this is just a lazy Sunday drive. Spoiler, it's not. The chariot is no Pinterest wagon. It's a roaring, flaming vessel pulled by four sentient, immortal, and extremely opinionated horses: Pyrawa, Ethon, and Fligan. Their breath smells like ash and burnt cinnamon. They're trained for Helios's steady hand, not Apollo's experimental flair. He takes off, and the first few seconds look okayish. The sky sparkles, birds cheer, but then he yanks the reins just a bit too hard, and the horses respond like moody teenagers being told to clean their rooms. They bolt, upward, downward, sideways. Apollo panics. His hair starts smoking. One sandal catches fire. From below, mortals stare at the sky in confusion. Why is the sun doing loop-the-loops? Someone probably asks in ancient Greek. Back in the clouds, Apollo is sweating divine sweat, which apparently smells like sage and hubris. The horses are bickering in horse Latin. Apollo attempts a mid-air pep talk, but no one's listening, not even him. One fringe version of the myth claims Apollo tried singing to soothe the horses, a tragic mistake, since he chose a tragic ballad in D minor and accidentally summoned a lightning storm. The sun, still spiraling, and somewhere deep in the Olympian clouds, Zeus glances over the top of a thundercloud with the wearied look of a dad who's about to ask, "Where's your mother?" You dangle somewhere above the Ionian Sea now, watching Apollo try to manhandle for flaming horsepower into something resembling a sunrise. The horses, who absolutely did not consent to this stunt, are losing patience. You'd think immortal beasts spread to pull the sun across the sky would be a little more professional, but no. Pyrawa kicks sideways, Ethon knees a stream of sparks, and Fligan actually sneezes fire. It's like herding dragons through a fire drill. See, Helios's horses weren't just symbolic. They had names, personalities, and apparently, drama. Ancient sources list them as siblings or cousins, depending on which scroll you believe. This is the morning horse, calm and proud. Fligan is the hothead, literally. Pyrawa handles midday sun, and Ethon's just there to bite stuff. Historians still argue whether these names were poetic invention or early attempts to explain the movement of the sun across the sky. Apollo, in all his glowing glory, doesn't know their quirks. He tugs left, and they jolt skyward. He loosens the reins, and they plummet toward the Peloponnese. Below, fishermen drop their nets and stare upward, muttering prayers. Somewhere, a farmer yells at his goat, as if that will solve anything. The chariot wheels hiss as they skim a cloud too fast. Apollo's golden armor begins to tarnish mid-flight. Gods oxidize too. Apparently, if you sweat hard enough in direct sunlight. He tries reasoning with them. "Come on guys, we're all professionals here," he pleads, while one horse tries to bite another's tail. Now here's a little-known tidbit. One myth variant says the horses could smell fear. That would explain a lot about Apollo's trajectory today. He's gripping the reins so tightly they're melting between his fingers, whispering this is fine like a meme god in denial. It doesn't help that these horses aren't fond of newcomers. Helios raised them. He brushed their manes, gave them poetic names, and maybe even hummed lullabies made of sunlight. Apollo. He rolled in this morning smelling like laurel oil and overconfidence. You drift lower, watching as the horses ignore him entirely and head straight for the coastlines. Somewhere near Corinth, a whole cliffside gets flash-fried. Trees crisp, waves steam, and some unlucky seagulls probably become puff pastry. This is not your usual sunrise. The clouds trail streaks of gold and ash, like someone spilled a lava lamp across the sky. Apollo tries singing again, this time a lullaby. No dice. One horse needs something rude. Another kicks a lightning bolt out of its own tail. That's probably not how physics works, but you're in a myth, so who's keeping track? And just as things look like they might stabilize, a mountain peak appears dangerously close. Apollo, wide-eyed, pulls back hard, but the horses are already choosing chaos. You blink slowly as Apollo's flaming chariot barely misses the jagged edge of Mount Taygetus, singeing a few unfortunate pine trees that probably didn't deserve to go out like that. The smell of burnt bark and divine panic hangs in the sky. From below, villagers watch the sun ricochet and collectively decide that maybe staying inside today is safer. Here's the thing the gods never admit: Olympus, for all its thunder and marble drama, has rules. Not many, but just enough to keep the place from turning into a celestial frat house. One of those rules: divine roles are sacred. You don't just swap jobs like tunics at a toga party. Apollo, god of music, medicine, and inconvenient truths, was not officially licensed to operate the flaming Sun-chariot, not without a special scroll, or so say some dusty scrolls themselves. Historians still argue whether Apollo was ever actually allowed to drive it at all. Was it a one-time emergency, a divine stunt, a Hellenistic PR move to make him more relatable to daytime worshippers? No one agrees. But one thing's certain: whatever permissions Apollo thought he had, he definitely didn't clear this with Helios. According to a fringe retelling found on a cracked piece of pottery probably made by a bored teenager in Delphi, Apollo bribed a minor wine god to forge a temporary sky license. And that's how he ended up winging it, quite literally, with only minimal divine oversight. Meanwhile, Olympus itself is pretending nothing's wrong. Hera is sipping nectar with a smile that says, "Not my department." Ares bets 5 drachmas on whether Apollo crashes. Dionysus offers wine and unsolicited skydiving advice from a flying grapevine hammock. Only Athena looks mildly concerned, furrowing her brow and scribbling something into a glowing scroll, labeled things that will backfire by Tuesday. But back to Apollo, who is now visibly regretting his choices. He's doing that thing people do when they're about to be caught, trying to look like they're in control, straightening his spine, smoothing his robes, smiling way too hard at passing storm clouds. The horses, still ignoring him, they dive low again, and this time clip the tip of a sacred olive grove. The flames don't catch miraculously, but a bunch of owls screech in protest. Maybe Athena hears them. Maybe she just adds another bullet point to the scroll. Meanwhile, Apollo spots a break in the clouds and aims upward, trying to get back on track. He mumbles something about altitude correction, like a panicked intern crashing the company chariot on his first day. The reins are fraying, the wheels are wobbling, and you, poor dream floating witness to all this, can only glide after the chaos, like a sleepy balloon, caught in mythological crosswind. You trail behind Apollo now, drifting lazily through thick curls of sun smoke. The air's too warm, like someone left the oven open across all of Greece. From above, the earth doesn't look scorched yet, but give it a few more minutes, because the moment Apollo loses that last bit of altitude discipline, things get bright, too bright. The horses, thrilled to be fully in charge now, plunge the chariot far lower than Helios ever would have allowed. What was once majestic golden light turns into a punishing white glare. Fields below start glowing like they've been lit from the inside. Crops shrivel in seconds. Chickens lay hard-boiled eggs. Somewhere in Thessaly, a shepherd's sandals melt to a rock, and he decides he's done with gods forever. Ancient poets describe the sky that day as white fire. That sounds dramatic because it was. Historians still argue whether this myth represents a literal natural disaster, like a volcanic eruption or a solar flare, or whether it's all symbolic of Apollo's youthful arrogance. Either way, the earth takes the hit. A poor mountain goat on Parnassus gets flash-grilled mid-climb. That detail doesn't show up in most translations. but a fragment from a forgotten comedy mentions it as a running joke, the Apollo BBQ special. It even became a slang phrase for overcooking lamb. Now imagine you're standing on a dusty Aegean shoreline, blinking up at the distorted sun while clutching a very confused dog. That's what it felt like for mortals. Panic without explanation. Priests start waving incense and screaming at the sky. Farmers fall to their knees. Oracles start babbling warnings, none of which rhyme. Apollo, meanwhile, is starting to look crispy. His hair, normally the glowing gold of a perfect harvest, is now more toasted wheat. He's trying to pull up, but every time he yanks the reins, the horses lurch harder, dragging the chariot in a jerky, stomach-lurching zigzag across the heavens. And then it happens, the lowest dip yet. The wheels brush the mountaintops. A monastery's bell tower cracks from the heat. Fish leap from boiling lakes. The chariot's shadow literally sets fire to a vineyard near Thebes, ruining a batch of wine that Dionysus had already labeled divine vintage. He's not going to be chill about that. You float along behind Apollo as he finally realizes he's in deep celestial trouble. His vision is blurring. The air sizzles. There's no turning back now. The world below is lighting up like kindling, and Zeus is starting to pay attention. And you know when Zeus pays attention, things get loud. You float just behind the flames now, watching the chariot streak across the sky like a sparkler lit at both ends. The world below squints up in fear. The gods above start exchanging nervous glances. And then you hear it, that unmistakable, slow-building rumble. Not thunder yet, but Zeus's version of a throat clear. The kind that says, "Do I have to come down there?" Apollo, mid-panic, mutters something about needing a do-over, but the sky is already vibrating. Somewhere over the Black Sea, clouds begin to swirl inward like the universe itself is holding its breath. And finally there it is, the dad bolt. Zeus doesn't throw thunderbolts like he's angry. He throws them like he's tired, like a cosmic parent who warned you 3 times already. The bolt doesn't hit Apollo. Zeus isn't trying to kill him, just remind him. And that reminder comes in the form of a blinding crack that explodes right above the chariot and makes the horses rear back like someone just hit hard reset on the sun. Apollo jerks the reins. The chariot stalls mid-air, listing to one side. A piece of axle splinters off and tumbles toward Crete. Below, goats scatter. Priests scream. A statue of Hera melts slightly and now permanently wears an expression of disappointment. Zeus's voice rumbles across the sky like rolling boulders in a marble hall. Enough. Even the horses freeze. Which, by the way, is pretty rare for fire-breathing immortal beasts. Apollo floats in stunned silence, blinking smoke from his eyes. His golden robe is scorched at the edges. His laurel crown is a tangled mess of ash and bad decisions. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. There's a minor cult that believed the thunderbolt Zeus used that day wasn't just a weapon, it was sentient. According to them, it whispered rookie mistake right before it landed. That's probably myth layering, but you never know with enchanted weaponry. Anyway, back on Earth, the world breathes again. The heat begins to fade. Rivers stop boiling. Farmers cautiously peek out from behind trees. And somewhere, a turtle very slowly stops roasting and resumes heading absolutely nowhere. Apollo tries to recover, but it's too late. His pride's singed beyond repair. The chariot is lurching. The reins are half melted. He's going to have to land this thing and fast. Zeus doesn't say another word, just glares from Olympus, thunderbolt still smoking, and turns away like, "I'll be in my cloud." And just like that, Apollo knows. No more driving privileges. At least not for the next few millennia. You drift downward now, coasting behind the battered remains of Apollo's Sun-chariot as it limps across the afternoon sky like a flaming shopping cart with a broken wheel. Below, the mortal world is still recovering from the cosmic joyride. Let's just say, things are crispy. Entire hillsides are scorched into neat brown lines. Lakes hiss with leftover heat. Chickens walk around in a daze, and cats refuse to come out from under anything. Crops, gone. Orchards, cooked. Somewhere near Athens, a statue of Poseidon now has a melted trident that looks suspiciously like a cheese stick. This wasn't just a bad day in the heavens, it was an ecological crisis. Ancient sources suggest that several cities reported spontaneous wildfires, droughts, and rivers that briefly ran warm. Historians still argue whether these tales reflect real climate events, or just metaphors for how terrifying it was to imagine. Your son driver didn't pass sky school. Apollo doesn't land so much as crash gently into a cloud bank. The horses scatter, neighing indignantly. You imagine they're filing a formal complaint with Helios. Apollo lies there, smoking slightly, his once golden or looking more like burnt honey. Meanwhile, on Earth, humans do what they always do: freak out, overcompensate, and build more temples. The logic goes something like, Sun got angry. Let's give him to more shrines and a roasted goat. Temple offerings increase. So do sacrifices, though not everyone agrees on which god is currently in charge of the sun, leading to some very confused altars. One fringe story from Delphi claims a group of panicked priests accidentally worshipped a passing seagull because its feathers looked fiery. That bird allegedly received a week of grapes, honey, and one very elaborate miniature throne before flying off. And while the mortals are busy rebuilding burnt rooftops and pretending this didn't happen, Olympus begins the damage control phase. There's no Twitter, but there is myth, and myths move fast. Some poets start spinning the tale as a heroic trial by fire for Apollo. Others call it an epic blunder. A few just refer to it as the bright day, which sounds lovely until you remember it was mostly screaming and dehydration. Apollo, still recovering, limps back to his temple, where the oracle greets him with polite silence and then locks the door. You can almost hear her mutter, "I told you so," in ancient Doric. Dionysus, he throws a sun-themed party and makes fun of him in song form. Artemis, we'll get to her next. But for now, the world is quiet again, singed, slightly tilted, but quiet. You hover just above Olympus as Apollo stumbles back into divine society, smelling faintly of burnt feathers and melted sandals. He tries to act cool, straightens his robe, hums a little tune, but the scorch marks on his cape are kind of a giveaway. And waiting for him, arms crossed, is Artemis. Now, Artemis is many things: goddess of the hunt, protector of wild animals, full-time introvert. But most importantly, she's Apollo's twin sister. And if you've ever had a sibling witness your most embarrassing moment, you already know he's not getting out of this lightly. She doesn't say much at first, just raises an eyebrow. Apollo tries to explain, launching into an overly dramatic speech about celestial instability and solar unpredictability. Artemis just pulls out an apple, takes a slow bite, and says, "You drove the sun into a vineyard." It's not a conversation, it's an assassination. Historians still argue whether Artemis had any say in the fallout, but a few ancient fragments suggest she may have pushed for consequences. After all, half her forests got toasted in the incident. And if you mess with her deer, that's personal. One hilarious fragment from a lost Homeric parody claims Artemis got her revenge by dropping a very confused deer directly onto Apollo's bed the next night. No injuries, just lots of hooves and shame. Meanwhile, the other gods are fully enjoying the drama. Hermes makes memes about Apollo's fiery hot takes. Hephaestus forges a tiny bronze chariot with training wheels and leaves it at Apollo's door. Even Athena, who usually avoids the gossip, allegedly writes a sarcastic haiku. Blazing sun god falls, croplands weep, fish question fate. Try moonlight next time. You follow Apollo as he sulks along the edge of Olympus, where even the clouds seem to whisper behind his back. He passes Hera, who coughs meaningfully into her hand and pretends not to smile. Hestia offers him tea. Dionysus offers him wine, a lot of wine. And Artemis, she finally claps him on the back and mutters, "You live." And fortunately, one fringe myth claims this entire chariot debacle became a sort of private joke between them. Whenever Apollo tried to act like a know-it-all in council meetings, Artemis would casually ask, "Need a ride?" You continue gliding above the gods, feeling the tension ease just a little. Apollo's pride is dented. His sun license is revoked, but the sky isn't on fire anymore, and in Olympus terms, that's a win. You coast gently toward Delphi now, where Apollo's temples sit smoldering in more ways than one, because after you almost fry the mortal realm with an out-of-control sky chariot, there are consequences. And in Apollo's case, that means his once flawless reputation as the god of order, prophecy, and poetic hair is officially in freefall. His oracle silent, which, for a woman known to shout cryptic rhymes into smoke-filled caves, is deeply unsettling. Worshippers arrive in droves, desperate for guidance after the bright day, but all they get is the smell of overcooked laurel leaves and one priest loudly insisting He meant well. Inside the temple, Apollo paces in circles. You can almost hear his internal monologue. It wasn't that bad. The clouds mostly grew back. Only 2 rivers boiled. People exaggerate. And fortunately, humans don't love ambiguity when their crops are on fire. Historical records, if you squint past the poetry, suggest a spike in confused omens and conflicting prophecies in the weeks following the incident. One city-state was told to prepare for war, another to throw a festival involving goats and colored ribbons, a third told to build an underground library and wait for the stars to blink. That priest may have also eaten a few questionable mushrooms. Fringe accounts from Fringe temples claim that one oracle simply walked out, muttering, "I'm opening a fish stall," and was never seen again. Delphi had never seen morale this low, mostly because its literal patron deity was now considered a liability with rains. Meanwhile, Apollo tries damage control. He personally appears at a few temples, offers musical apologies, and promises not to improvise transportation again. He even composes a hymn to explain the whole thing, which definitely sounds like someone covering up a divine DUI. Olympus, though, isn't helping. Hermes keeps delivering contradictory messages from the gods. One scroll says Apollo's reinstated, another says he's on cloud cleaning duty until further notice. A third just says, "Nice job, sunshine," in sarcastic gold ink. Even his cults are confused. Some double down, claiming the flaming ride was symbolic of rebirth and trial. Others start shifting allegiance to Helios again. The temples of Rhodes quietly go back to sunrise worship like nothing happened. You watch Apollo sitting at the base of his own temple, picking at a lyre string, probably wondering how a short joyride turned into an existential PR crisis. And far away, the sun rises, this time on schedule, but nobody's exactly sure who is driving anymore. You glide now through a haze of scrolls, statues, and centuries-old debates because while Apollo may have crash-landed the sun, the story didn't exactly land the same way for everyone. Scholars, poets, dramatists, and bored temple interns all seem to have their own version of what happened, and none of them agree on the big question: was Apollo actually banned? Historians still argue whether Zeus officially revoked Apollo's solar privileges, or if it was more of an unspoken understanding, sealed with side A and scorched clouds. Some scrolls say Zeus gave him a permanent suspension. Others suggest he voluntarily stepped down after reevaluating his celestial goals. That sounds suspiciously like someone trying to save face after flying the chariot into a metaphorical tree. Then you get the weirder versions. One papyrus fragment claims Helios and Apollo flipped the gold drachma for the rights to the sky shift. Another says the horses themselves ionized and refused to work under Apollo ever again unless they got ambrosia, breaks, and a personal cooling cloud. More poetic retellings frame it like a tragedy: Apollo, the radiant youth, too bold, too bright, punished not for malice but for daring to dream. You know, that classic upside-burned earth genre. But here's the mainstream fact: by the classical period, Helios starts reclaiming the sun in more stories, while Apollo gradually shifts back into his usual divine duties: music, medicine, archery, and occasionally throwing shade at mortals who get too full of themselves. Some temples never even acknowledged the sun driver era. Others just pretended it was always metaphor. Theologians in later periods tried to reconcile the contradiction. Some said Apollo was never the literal chariot driver, just the spirit of sunlight. That way, no one had to admit he flamed out of control and flash spoiled the forest. Convenient, right? Meanwhile, you hover by a group of young philosophers in Athens, arguing loudly about the solar metaphor. One insists the whole story is symbolic of ego unchecked. Another says it's clearly about climate imbalance. The third just wants everyone to stop yelling so he can finish his cheese. And above all this noisy debate, Apollo plays his lyre again, quietly, not in a temple, not in front of a crowd, just alone, on the edge of a cloud. And the melody, it's bright, wistful, almost apologetic. Whether he was banned, benched, or just backed away, the sun hasn't been the same since, and neither, really, has Apollo. You trail behind one last flicker of gold as the myth begins to fade into dusk. The sun, now stable, rises and sets without incident. Most days, anyway. But every now and then during certain solar eclipses, some say you can glimpse Apollo's chariot in the shadows, hovering behind the darkened disk. like a god still itching for another chance behind the reins. The idea has grown into a quiet rumor among modern myth nerds and New Age mystics that Apollo was never truly banned, just put on something like divine probation. Fringe beliefs claim that during eclipses, when the sun dims and the world holds its breath, Apollo returns to steer, just for a moment under heavy supervision and celestial side eyes. Of course, no ancient text confirms this. Historians still argue whether eclipses were seen as omens, resets, or just solar hiccups. But some Hellenistic poets did love a good comeback arc. One lost tragedy tentatively titled, The Golden Drive paints Apollo as a fallen hero who one day wins back the chariot, reigns by showing restraint, maturity, and a shocking ability to follow directions. Totally fictional, but kind of inspiring. In more mainstream myths, Helios remains the official driver, a professional, steady, horse whisperer, probably keeps a clipboard. Meanwhile, Apollo keeps his domain below the clouds, guiding oracles, curing plagues, composing endless ballads about his brief but meaningful time in the sky. You imagine him now, watching the sun rise from a distance. Not envious, just reflective, maybe a little wistful. Artemis strolls by and mutters something sarcastic. Apollo rolls his eyes but smiles. He's fine. The world keeps spinning. The temples still stand. The horses, you'll be happy to hear, got a spa day and a divine ode bonus. So, the next time the sky darkens midday and people stare up with cardboard glasses, remember there might be an old golden chariot lurking just behind the moon, with a slightly singed god humming to himself, waiting for a green light that probably won't come. But for now, the sun stays on track. The gods sleep, the myths grow quiet, and now, as the stars slowly blink into view across a myth-touched sky, you drift quietly back from Olympus, letting go of the smoke trails and thunder echoes, the singed robes and fiery hooves. Everything softens, the flaming chaos fades, and all that remains is a golden warmth stretching across your chest like a gentle sunrise that knows better than to arrive too early. You feel your body grow heavy in the best way, like a statue finally laid to rest in a garden, overgrown with lavender and thyme. The horses, once wild, now sleep curled around a distant constellation. Even Apollo, ever restless, finally reclines on a cloud that doesn't demand staring, lulled by the silence of a lesson learned. Let your breath fall slow. Let your thoughts scatter like ancient scrolls left unread for centuries. Whatever burned too brightly today has cooled, tucked gently into the folds of memory where it can't scorch anything anymore. The chariot's wheels no longer spin, the reins lie still, and the night, vast and unbothered, stretches endlessly around you. Tomorrow can have its questions, its debates, its dramatics, but tonight, you have nothing to prove. You are stardust, unbothered by myth or mistake, just floating, just resting, just dreaming.